My car went off a mountain road at night. I was alone, injured, and 5 miles from anyone. This is how I survived 6 days. What's up, everyone? Grab a seat. This one hits different. Let's go. The car stopped rolling on the fourth impact. I know it was the fourth because I counted. Not on purpose. My brain just did it, the way it does things automatically when the rest of you is too busy surviving to think. When everything went still, I was upside down, suspended by my seatbelt, in complete darkness, somewhere on the side of a mountain in Montana that nobody knew I was on. My phone was gone. The engine was making a sound like something dying, and the temperature outside was dropping towards zero. I had no idea yet how long I was going to be there. If I had known, I think something in me would have given up. Not knowing was the only advantage I had. I need to back up, because the how matters. I'm 31. My name is Mara. I'm a landscape photographer based in Seattle, which means I spend a significant portion of my life driving to places that are beautiful, specifically because they're remote. I've done this for 6 years. I know how to read weather, how to pack an emergency kit, how to tell someone my route before I leave. I was not reckless. I want to say that clearly, because what happened to me is the kind of thing that happens to careful people too. And I think pretending otherwise gives everyone else a false sense of safety. It was late October. I was driving a section of highway in western Montana, heading back from 3 days shooting in Glacier National Park. The route was one I'd taken before, once, 2 years earlier, in better conditions. That night, the conditions were not better. A storm had come in faster than the forecast suggested, which anyone who spends time in the mountains knows is something forecasts do. The road was wet, then icy in patches, in the specific way that mountain roads ice. Not uniformly, but suddenly, in places you don't see until you're already on them. I came around a curve at a speed that was appropriate for wet road and was not appropriate for what the wet road had become. I felt the rear of the car go. I did what you're supposed to do, steered into the skid, no brakes. And for 1 second, it seemed like it might be okay. It was not okay. The guardrail caught the passenger side, which spun me. And then I was off the edge and the world went sideways and then upside down and then sideways again. And somewhere in the second or third row, my phone, which had been in the cup holder, was simply gone. I didn't see it go. It was just there, and then it wasn't. 4 impacts, then stillness, then the sound of the engine, then silence except for wind and the distant sound of something dripping, which I hoped was water and not anything worse. I took inventory of myself before I moved, which is something I knew to do from a wilderness first aid course I'd taken years earlier and had never expected to actually use. I could feel my hands, both feet. I had pain in my left shoulder and my ribs on the right side, and my forehead felt wet, which meant I was bleeding from somewhere above my hairline. None of that was good. None of it was immediately catastrophic. I unbuckled the seatbelt slowly, braced myself against the roof, which was now the floor, and got myself upright. The car was on its roof, wedged against a tree about 40 feet below the road. I could see the road above me if I looked up through what had been the windshield. It was very dark. There were no headlights, no sounds of other cars, just the wind and the cold and the dripping. I sat with that reality for about 60 seconds. Then I started figuring out what I had. This is the part where being a careful person actually mattered. In the back of my car, a Subaru Outback that I'd packed the same way for 6 years, I had a gear bag that I took on every shoot. In that bag, 2 wool layers, a down jacket, waterproof pants, wool socks, a headlamp with fresh batteries, a lighter, a small first aid kit, 2 protein bars, a water bottle that was still half full, and an emergency bivvy, one of those crinkly metallic sleeping bag things that weighs almost nothing and retains body heat like a miracle. I also had my camera bag, which was useless for survival but contained a tripod that I would later realize was extremely useful for something else entirely. What I did not have? My phone, any food beyond 2 protein bars, a way to signal for help beyond what I could make myself. I got the gear bag out through the broken rear window, which required about 10 minutes of careful maneuvering that made my ribs remind me they existed with every movement. I put on every layer I had. I wrapped the wound on my forehead, a cut about 2 inches long. Not deep enough to be immediately dangerous, but bleeding in the persistent way that head wounds do, with gauze from the first aid kit and held pressure on it until it slowed. Then I sat in the emergency bivvy inside the shell of my car, and I thought about what the next hours needed to look like. Here's what I knew. The road I'd gone off was not heavily traveled, especially not in October, especially not at night in a storm. waiting for someone to see the gap in the guardrail and investigate if the guardrail was even visibly damaged. Could take hours or days. I told my friend Denise my general route, but not a specific ETA, which meant she wouldn't start worrying until I missed a check-in that wasn't scheduled until the following evening. That was 18 hours away. 18 hours in Montana in late October. Injured and without shelter beyond a wrecked car. Was survivable if I was smart. It was also the kind of thing that went wrong fast if I wasn't. I made a decision. I would stay with the car through the night because moving injured in the dark on an icy mountain slope was how you made a bad situation fatal. In the morning, if no one had come, I would reassess. No one came that night. Dawn came gray and still. The storm had passed but left 8 inches of snow on the ground that hadn't been there when I went off the road. My car was now half buried and completely invisible from the road above. I climbed up to check and saw exactly nothing where my car should have been visible. The snow had erased me. That was the moment the situation changed categories. Not stranded until someone sees the guardrail. Stranded until someone actively looks. I stood on the road for a long time. In 40 minutes, 2 cars passed. I waved. Neither stopped. It was early. It was remote. A woman waving on the side of a mountain road in the snow is probably not the first thing anyone processes at 6 a.m. I understand that. In the moment, I wanted to scream. I went back down to the car. I ate half a protein bar, which I decided was my ration. Half a bar in the morning, half at night, which gave me 4 half portions and bought me time. I drank carefully from the water bottle. Then, I got the tripod out of my camera bag. A camera tripod, fully extended, is about 5.5 feet tall. Strapped to the top of it, using the bungee cords I kept in the gear bag for securing equipment, was my down jacket, the brightest thing I had, a vivid orange that I'd chosen specifically because I photograph in wilderness, and orange is visible. I planted the tripod in the snow at the roadside, jacket extended like a flag, and weighted the base with rocks from the slope. It wasn't much, but it was something that hadn't been there before, something that didn't belong, something that a searching eye might catch. Then I went back to the car, got back in the bivvy, and waited. I'm going to be honest about these days because I think the honest version is more useful than the version where I tell you I stayed calm and focused the whole time. I did not stay calm the whole time. Day 2. Denise missed my check-in and called the number I'd given her for the park service, who started making calls. I didn't know this. What I knew was that my ribs hurt with every breath, my head wound had closed but left me with a headache that never fully went away, and I had 3 protein bar halves left and water I was now supplementing by melting snow in my water bottle, held against my body heat, which worked slowly and inefficiently and required me to stay very still for long periods, which was its own particular kind of maddening. Day 3. I heard a helicopter. Distant, then closer, then gone. I got outside and waved and yelled until my voice gave out. The helicopter did not come back. I sat in the snow after it disappeared and cried for about 20 minutes. Real, ugly, desperate crying. And then I stopped because crying in the cold dehydrates you and I couldn't afford it. That was the hardest moment. Not the accident, not the first night, not the cold. The helicopter that passed and didn't see me. Day 4. I found a stream about 100 meters from the car, following the sound of moving water through the trees. Moving water in winter is usually safe to drink. I didn't have a way to filter it, but I drank it anyway, which was a calculated risk. The risk of waterborne illness in 4 to 7 days versus the certainty of dehydration now. I filled my bottle 3 times and carried it back to the car and felt, for the first time in days, slightly less like I was losing. I also found, near the stream, a cluster of pine trees with low branches that had kept a patch of ground mostly snow-free. I spent 2 hours that afternoon breaking dead branches, the dry ones on the undersides of live trees, and built a small signal fire at the roadside, close enough to the tripod and jacket that they formed a single visible cluster. I didn't light it yet. I was saving the lighter for the moment. It would matter most, which I decided was the sound of any aircraft. Day 5. I ate the last half protein bar in the morning and spent the afternoon trying not to think about food by doing the thing my brain had always done under stress. Cataloging, listing, counting. I counted the trees I could see from the car. I mentally walked through the layout of my apartment in Seattle, room by room, object by object. I planned, in obsessive detail, exactly what I was going to eat when I got out. A cheeseburger appeared in this fantasy so many times and with such specificity that I can still describe it precisely. Cheddar, caramelized onions, brioche bun served with fries that were crispy on the outside and soft inside. I am not exaggerating when I tell you that cheeseburger kept me going through day 5. Day 6 started the same as the others. Cold, gray, quiet. I had water. I had no food. My ribs had settled into a dull, constant ache that I'd learned to move around. My headache had finally faded to something manageable. At 11:17 a.m., I know the time because the search and rescue team told me afterward, I heard the helicopter again. Day 6, 11:17 a.m., I was out of the car before I'd consciously decided to move. The lighter was in my hand. I lit the signal fire. The branches caught faster than I expected. The dry wood I'd chosen doing exactly what dry wood does. And then I was standing at the roadside next to the orange jacket on the tripod, next to a fire that was putting up a thin column of smoke into a clear, cold sky, waving both arms over my head, screaming. The helicopter came from the north. It was moving parallel to the road, lower than the one on day 3, and I watched it with everything I had, every cell of focus I've been hoarding for 6 days, willing it to turn. It turned. It banked left and dropped altitude and came toward me, and I kept waving, and the smoke kept rising. And then it was overhead and so loud I couldn't hear myself screaming anymore, and I didn't care. I just kept waving, both arms, as big as I could make myself against the white of the snow. It landed on the road above me. 2 people in orange jackets came down the slope. The first one reached me and grabbed my arm to steady me and said something I couldn't hear over the rotors, and I said, I know this because she told me later. I said, I need a cheeseburger. She laughed. She said they work on that. They got me up the slope on a stretcher, which my ribs did not enjoy and which I did not care about at all. They loaded me into the helicopter. The rotors changed pitch and the ground dropped away, and I watched the orange jacket on the tripod get smaller and smaller until I couldn't see it anymore. 2 cracked ribs, mild hypothermia, moderate dehydration. The head wound had closed cleanly on its own. The ER doctor told me I was in remarkably good shape for 6 days, which I privately thought was the most relative compliment I'd ever received. Denise was in the waiting room. She'd driven 8 hours from Seattle the moment the search team confirmed they'd found me. When I came through the door, she looked at me for 1 second and then burst into tears, which made me burst into tears, which made my ribs hurt, which made us both laugh through the crying, which made my ribs hurt more. The cheeseburger arrived via hospital cafeteria about an hour later. It was nothing like the one in my imagination. It was the best thing I've ever eaten in my life. I still photograph landscapes. I went back to Montana the following summer, different road, better weather, and stood at the edge of a mountain vista and felt nothing but gratitude for the specific quality of light at 6 p.m. in July. What changed is the kit in my car. It now includes a personal locator beacon, a PLB, a small device that when activated sends a distress signal to satellites regardless of cell coverage, with your GPS coordinates attached. They cost about $300. They work everywhere. If I'd had one on that road, the rescue would have happened in hours, not 6 days. I think about that number, $300, against 6 days on a Montana mountainside, and the math is extremely clear. I also tell people specific ETAs now, not, I'll be back sometime Sunday. I'll be back by 6 p.m. Sunday. And if you haven't heard from me by 6:30, you call this number. Specificity is the difference between someone worrying at 6:35 and someone worrying at the end of the day and deciding to wait until morning. The tripod is still in my car. The orange jacket too. Some things you keep not because you expect to need them again, but because they remind you of what you're capable of when you have to be. 6 days, 2 protein bars, 1 lighter, 1 very specific imaginary cheeseburger. It turns out that's enough to get through almost anything. If you drive or hike in remote areas, please look into personal locator beacons. They are the single most important piece of safety equipment most people don't have. It costs less than a nice dinner, and it works when your phone doesn't. And if you stayed until the end, thank you, genuinely. Like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.